Well, it is an honor to welcome back to the Carmel Clay Public Library. Is this the third time, Jeffrey?
Second in person and one virtual.
Yeah, we did one virtual during COVID times. This is our second in-person Jeffrey Blount, the award-winning author, Emmy-winning television director, and distinguished voice in the world of storytelling. With a career spanning over 3 decades at NBC News, Jeffrey has brought powerful narratives to life, both on screen and through his writing. His novels, including The Emancipation of Evan Walls and Hating Heidi Foster, delve into complex themes of race, identity, and the human experience, earning him critical acclaim and a devoted readership. Today, Jeffrey is here to discuss his newest novel, Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way, a story about failure, self-discovery, empowerment, and the possibility of redemption. Please join me in welcoming the insightful and inspiring Jeffrey Blount.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I want to start today by highlighting a single word: activism. Now, it's a dirty word for a lot of people today. When they hear it, they think of things like cities on fire, tens of thousands of people in the street, personal injury, and maybe even death. And all of those things do and have occurred under the umbrella of activism. But I believe, and I'm here to tell you today, that those things make up only a small percentage of the word. The larger percentage of the word activism is made up by all the wonderful, beautiful things we do every day that we don't consider to be activism. For instance, if you were to go to your child's school to speak to her teacher about some issue they're having, to work it out so that they can move forward better, then you have been, in my mind, an activist for better education. Because what if that teacher learned something and began to teach a little differently? If you went to a hospital or another medical facility and you had to advocate on behalf of a friend or family, in my mind, you were an activist for better health care. If you have fed the hungry, you participated in activism. If you have clothed the partially clothed, then you have participated in activism. And you've done so at that base humanitarian level where you recognize each other's base humanity and the idea that we all should be able to be fed and that we all should be able to be properly clothed. This is a kind of activism that I carried with me every second that I spent writing Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way. And by the time I finished, I developed my own phrase. I coined my own phrase for myself that I would say to myself as I sat down to write and throughout the process. And that is the activism of kindness. And that is what I was trying to relay in this book and what I wanted Mr. Jimmy to do in this book. So James Henry Ferguson is an African-American billionaire. And he is popular. You see him on television, on the business shows, in the newspaper. And he's actually, for a billionaire, kind of beloved because of his philanthropic nature. But all of that falls away when he suffers an incredibly public and shocking fall from grace. Now, having been raised in the rural South, he figures if I go as far as I can to the South and to a place, a really small remote community, maybe social media and traditional media won't find me there. So he buys a house in Ham, Mississippi, sight unseen on the internet, shows up to this house hoping that he's going to have some free time to spend and reflect and find his way back to his family and fix the things that he has broken. Well, he doesn't realize that the house he's purchased is adjacent to a neighborhood mired in total abject poverty. The kind of poverty we don't want to admit exists in the greatest nation in the world, but it does. And he doesn't want to have anything to do with it. He's got his own problems, but he does get drawn into this community. And then there is an incredible, incredible discovery that threatens to break this community. And it takes everything he has to keep them from falling under the weight of their poverty even as he is trying to find his own way to some sort of redemption. Now, I like to think of Mr. Jimmy from around the way as a kind of activism, a kind of literary activism, because I believe in the power of the written word. Margaret Atwood said, a word after a word after a word is power. And I believe that the written word has the power to make change and make people think. And so I wanted people to understand what fellow Americans were living like in these communities, where in each of these communities they suffer from a lack of education, a lack of health care, poor housing. And was really shocking to me in the research was the lack of local, state, and government services. We acted as if these communities don't even exist. And psychologists have said that they have fallen into something that they now call social death, which has a huge, broad study going on. But I picked out my part of it, which is that we will allow communities like this to exist by themselves, and they have no strings to pull in the larger part of the community. And so they just grow more and more insular, and they die and they die and they die, and it just happens. And we just allow that to happen. And I wanted to write this book to show that people exist this way. And I know that the better parts of us, if we knew about this, would make a difference. And so I've known that news stories can make change. I knew that books can make change. If you ever read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, then you know that when he wrote that book, he was writing about the meatpacking industry and how poorly the workspaces were when they were making the meat. As the story goes, President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, was eating a breakfast with his breakfast meat when he was reading this book, and they say he threw it out the window of the White House. I don't have any idea whether that's true, but this is true. They did create legislation because of his book. And a man sat in a room by himself and wrote a novel and changed the legislative direction of a nation. And while I don't expect Mr. Jimmy to do that, I do expect Mr. Jimmy to make changes in the way that it can, and it has been doing so, and I'm very proud of that. And I have had people say to me, and early on when I went on tour, you know, I read Mr. Jimmy, I loved it, but I don't know that what you say he can do actually exists. In today's world, that we actually can get past all of these things that keep us apart so that we can see that humanity you keep talking about. And we had a discussion about all the different filters that we have that keep us from really seeing each other. And I said to him, well, the only way I can explain this to you is to tell you something that happened in my life to let me know that we can get past this. My wife and I, our two little kids at the time, were driving to Maine from Washington, D.C. I like to drive at night, less traffic, so we're driving along, and we're on Interstate 95 north of New York. And there's a white panel van in front of us. And it starts to go, weave from lane to lane. People start slowing down to get out of its way. It tilts up on two wheels, slams on its side, and goes off the side of the road. Traffic stops. I get out of my car. Other people get out of their cars, and we're running to this van. And we pull him out. You know, there were no explosions. It wasn't like in the movies or anything like that, but we get him out. But when we're driving, I say to Gene, you know what? Here's what I didn't know. And I don't think anybody else knew as we ran to that van. I didn't know if they were black. I didn't know if they were white. I didn't know if they were Muslim. I didn't know if they were Jewish. All I knew is that there was a human life at risk. Instinctively, I knew like it was to breathe, that it was my job to do something. Not to mention my parents had taught me. I remember my mom saying to me, you are not here on this earth just for yourself. If you see a fellow human being in need, it is your duty to stand up and do something. And my dad said, and not only that, if you're feeling sad or bad about yourself, the best way to make yourself feel good is to do something for somebody else. And so I created a character to help with this. At one point, Mr. Jimmy's sitting on his porch, and this woman drives up in her Honda Civic, and she gets out, and there's red hair all over the place, and she's walking like fire up to the steps. And there is this woman, Olivia Fay Carroll, who was not in the original book. But when I got to the end and decided I wanted people to know we can look past these things, I put white Olivia Fay Carroll in the book. And there's a time when you read Mr. Jimmy and Olivia will walk into a Board of Supervisors meeting holding hands. Olivia's family becomes Mr. Jimmy's family. And together, they tell you, I hope the reader, that the village can look like anybody, and the village can help everybody. So when you stop reading Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way, I hope you will feel what I carried this. This is the book I carried around with me when I was touring, but there are two things that readers wrote that I want to tell you. In addition to rooting for Mr. Jimmy and his neighborhood, you may find the inspiration to help out in your own unique way. And I have never had a fictional book strike such a call to action in my soul before. So when you finish Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way, I want you to think of this line from the UN mission statement that I stole and that I believe in and where all my politics began. Every human being is born free and equal in dignity and rights. Every human being. And so I would like you to close the book and hopefully go out and make a change in any way you can. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, revolutionarily yours in kindness, I thank you.
Thank you so much to Jeffrey. Oh my goodness.